Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're at a really nice juncture in this chapter 14 that's dealing with the Brahma Vimohan Lila. Brahma Vimohan Lila. You all know Krishna's Brahma stealing the cowherd boys and calves, right? You know, okay. So after the pastime and his prayers, takes 40 verses, and starting with 41, Brahma circumambulates, he departs, he takes Krishna's silence as consent that he can return to Brahmaloka and continue his service. Krishna goes and gathers up the calves and returns with the calves to the cowherd boys who are sitting in the same place that they were 1 year ago, with having not even eaten one bite yet, and their food didn't get stale over 1 year. I find that's amazing. I mean, it's one thing that souls can be, under the influence of Yogamaya. Souls can be under the influence of Yogamaya and not remember things. But how does lunch not spoil? It's really a very special internal potency arrangement. In any case, they finish lunch. They go back to Braj. The boys are singing. Krishna is very happy. And the residents of Vrindavan, as far as they're concerned, Krishna's coming back for a whole year, along with Krishna's manifestations of their cowherd boys, and thus Krishna was the son of all the mothers and fathers. But the statement is there that they were more jubilant than even before. So Maharaj Parikshit is asking, "O Brahmana, how could the cowherd women have developed for Krishna, who is someone else's son, such unprecedented pure love they never even felt for their own children? Please explain this." So kids may not understand this, but parents understand that there's special affection for your children. You may have affection for other children, but... So the doubt goes like this. Before the Brahma Vimohan Lila, they had more affection for Krishna than for their own son. And they were desiring to have Krishna as their son. And then Krishna became their son by his expansion for a whole year. And their affection for their son, who was Krishna, grew even more than their affection for Krishna, because there was a kind of possessiveness of their son, who was Krishna. So their affection for Krishna plus their affection for their family member made greater affection. But the surprise was, after that, the very next day, when they came back from herding, their affection for Krishna grew even more than, the previous 2 times. So how's that? Please explain. Sanatana Goswami writes, "Oh, direct form of the Vedas, Brahmana, you know everything. The women thought of Krishna as the son of Yashoda, not as the Lord. They should not develop more affection for him than their own children. So they're not seeing him as the personality of Godhead. He's just somebody else's son. They should not develop more affection for him than for their own children. An object shows itself by its nature. What is the reasoning for this attraction? They developed more love than previously, even for their own sons, when Krishna was their own sons. Please explain this. The question is, how did this happen? Not, was it suitable? There are many cases of even giving up one's children. So, seeing many sages undergoing austerities, but with attachment to their children rather than the Lord, Parikshit addresses Sukadev while laughing at them, the sages who did austerities but were more attached to their children rather than to the Lord. And this is the reverse, more attached to the Lord rather than their children. Jiva Goswami in his Kramasandarbha writes, King Parikshit is expressing, O Brahmana, how could the cowherd women have developed for Krishna, someone else's son, such unprecedented pure love they never felt even for their own children? Please explain this. Paragraph. How could they develop love for Krishna manifested with names and forms of the cowherd boys like Sridham? Meaning he already just was everybody's son. And text is 50 as Sukadev begins a 5-verse series explaining the answer. Sukadev Goswami said, O king, for every created being, the dearmost thing is certainly his own self. The dearness of everything else, children, wealth, and so on, is due only to the dearness of the self. Purport. Sometimes modern thinkers become puzzled when they study the psychology of moral behavior. Although every living entity is inclined toward self-preservation, as stated here, sometimes a person voluntarily sacrifices his own apparent interest through philanthropic or patriotic activities, such as giving his money for the benefit of others or giving his life for the national interest. Such so-called selfless behavior appears to contradict the principle of material self-centeredness and self-preservation. Paragraph. As explained in this verse, however, a living entity serves his society, nation, family, and so on only because these objects of affection represent the expanded concept of false ego. A patriot sees himself as a great servitor of a great nation, and thus he sacrifices his life to gratify his sense of egotism. Similarly, it is common knowledge that a man feels great pleasure by thinking that he is sacrificing everything to please his dear wife and children. A man derives great egotistic pleasure by seeing himself as a selfless well-wisher of his so-called family and community. Thus, to gratify his proud sense of false ego, a man is prepared even to lay down his life. This apparently contradictory behavior is yet another demonstration of the bewilderment of material life, which has neither rhyme nor reason, being a manifestation of gross ignorance of the non-material soul. And Vishwanath Chakravarti writes, Shukadev speaks, O king, a person has more attachment for his self than for his children, unquote. This fact will be examined first in 5 verses before coming to a conclusion. In ordinary dealings, one's own self is the object of extreme attachment. For each body, there is one soul, and for that body alone, and not others. That was pretty short purport. Our commentary. Here's Jiva Goswami's, a little longer. Krishna, as Paramatma, gives affection to all beings. He is dearer to everyone than their own Atma. Krishna as Paramatma. What to speak of being dearer than one's relatives and objects which give pleasure? To say that, first, the dearness of one's own Atma is established. So that's where this train is going. Actually, it's Krishna who's most dear. But Jiva Goswami is saying, Shukadev is starting with the dearness of the soul, and that was connected to the soul, has to do with dearness to the soul. Okay. All other dear objects are based upon this. This is explained in 5 verses. Because of no clear distinction of body from soul, Svatma here refers to the conception of self arising from ahankar. Got it? The conception of self as the body is resting upon the self. But the frame of reference is the ahankar, or false ego conception, arises from the self. Thus, possessiveness in this case excludes prema. What's that? When there's ahankar, there's no prema. Now, the reason for bringing this up, the Jiva Goswami is bringing this up, is the residents of Vrindavan have prema. And that's the reason for their special affection. And they're not blocked by ahankar. Worldly people are. And because of ahankar, then they have this sense of being very attached to mind. But so Sukadeva Goswami's starting point, it's interesting. I mean, the question is interesting, and the response is more interesting. Everything's rested. The dearest thing to everybody is themselves. And we can speak of that themselves in terms of the bodily conception, but it's me-centered, at least. The word swa, or own, indicates that every individual experiences the self. O king! Exclamation point. Because of such qualities in humans, the king also protects the citizens. The word he indicates that the experience of this is the proof. And now we're going on to Sanatana Goswami's commentary. There's some similar points. Krishna as Paramatma gives affection to all beings. He is dearer to everyone than their own Atma. What to speak of being dearer than one's relatives and objects, which give pleasure? To say that, first, the dearness of one's own Atma is established. Same points. All other dear objects are based upon this. This is explained in 5 verses. Paragraph. Because jnana has not developed, one has affection for one's own atma because of seeing difference from the atma of others. Or the other way around. When you have knowledge of the soul, you see living entities equally. When you don't have knowledge of the soul, you have unequal affection. Some likes, some dislikes. One directly experiences spontaneously the dearness of one's own atma. It is dearer than children, wife, and house. Apatya vitadya. The body is not mentioned because previously the body was mentioned as the most dear by conceiving of it as the self. That's several verses within Brahma's prayers. Or the body is also included in adya. Adya. One directly sees in dearness by the way one especially cares for one's own body. What's that mean? One directly sees proportionate to one's ability to, one's tendency to see dearness of someone or something, has a direct correspondence with how important you consider your own body. That is, relationships with the body. I value, yes? Because I'm in the bodily conception of life, I hold as dear those things which are in relation to this body, or the byproducts of this body, like family, etc. Natural. But supposing, that what's behind that misconception of self is the self. Okay, let's go on. For example, a king like you, Maharaj Parikshit, protecting the citizens is dear. This is because the dearness of one's Atma, since it is the essence of all other Atmas. He indicates this is proved by experience. This will become clearer as we go along. It's a little foggy. Jiva Goswami's Krama Sandarbha says, Shukadev Goswami, translation of the verse and then commentary. O king, for every created being, the dearest thing is certainly his own self. The dearest of everything else, children, wealth, and so on, is due to only the dearness of the self. And his commentary reads, same language. Krishna as Paramatma gives affection to all beings. He is dearer to everyone than their own Atma. What to speak of being dearer than one's relatives and objects, which give pleasure. To say that the first, the dearness of one's own Atma is established. All other dear objects are based upon this. This is explained in 5 verses. Because of no clear distinction of body from soul, svatma here refers to the conception of self arising from ahankar. Thus, possessiveness. Now, what this possessiveness, it keeps coming up. The mamata is at least one of the words that's translated as possessiveness. And it has its place in material life. It has its super excellent position in Vrindavan. the glorification of the residents of Vrindavan's love for Krishna, unlike others that have prema, is the degree of possessiveness they have towards Krishna. And it's a little bit what's this topic is about. That is, for those that have families, there's a sense of possessiveness towards other family members. My brother, my sister, my mother, my father, my son, my daughter, my uncle, my this and that. There's a sense of possessiveness because of the connection that's unlike any other connection. That's other children may be nice, or other people that may be nice, and you have some appreciation for them. But there's a possessiveness connected with the intimacy within a family. Naturally so. So where this is going is, there's a possessiveness for the resident of Vrindavan towards Krishna, and that it's that the unprecedented nature of their affection for Krishna, even more so than for their own sons, has to do with where the whole discussion is going is Krishna is the soul of all souls. But the starting point is the possessiveness has to do with the soul. And that which is connected to the soul. The coverings. And when there's material or ahankar-based possessiveness, it excludes prema. The word sva, or own, indicates that every individual experiences the self. And again, that's self in terms of false ego. We all were covered by false ego. But that's resting upon the spirit soul. Should we do one more verse? Or should we just discuss what we just read? Let's do one more verse. Okay. For this reason, O best of kings, the embodied soul is self-centered, : that's the punctuation here. He is more attached to his own body and self than to his so-called possessions like children, wealth, and home. Now remember, there's self-sacrificing people that give up their lives for their nation or their family or their something, their dog or something. But, okay. It is now common practice all over the world for a mother to kill her own child within the womb if the birth of that child represents an inconvenience for her. Similarly, grown children eagerly place their elderly parents in lonely institutions rather than being inconvenienced by their presence at home. That's a little harsh. These and innumerable other examples prove that people in general, this is not Prabhupada, by the way. Anyway, these and innumerable other examples prove that people in general are more attached to their own body and self, which represents I-ness, than to their family and other possessions, who represent my-ness. Although conditioned souls are very proud of their so-called love for society, family, and so forth, in reality, every conditioned soul is acting on the platform of gross or subtle selfishness. Vishwanath Chakravarti's commentary is very short. One sentence. The preference for one's own self over attachment to sons, wealth, and house is natural. Jiva Goswami writes, the negative aspect is shown. Sridhar Swami explains this in terms of ahankar. Attachment and less attached to those things than what one is attached to. That's the negative. The previous verse is one is attached to the Atma, and this one is less attached to the objects connected to the body. The next verse, however, indicates with the words dehatma vadinam, those who think the self is the body. Other versions of the words are not approved. There's other versions of the Bhagavatam Jiva Goswami is dismissing because of the intended statement and the mention of the body in the next verse. It gives some Sanskrit argument. The objects of possessiveness have less attraction than the self. O king, you know well that even the king does not have as much affection for the kingdom as he does for himself. Sanatana Goswami writes, one has affection for one's own Atma in the body, Svaka Atmani. Sridhar Swami explains, Sridhar Swami explains this in terms of ahankar, because of identification with the body. However, it's not proper to say that Atmani means for the body, unquote, for the body, since thinking that one is the body is explained in the next verse. It would be redundant. For those who understand that they are Atma, not the body, Dehinan, there is affection for the Atma. The affection for objects of possession, like children, is less than the affection for the self with the identity of I. O great king, one does not have as much affection for the kingdom as for the self, you know that. And from Kramasandarbha, very short, for this reason, O best of kings, the embodied soul is self-centered. That is, he is more attached to his own body and self than to his so-called possessions, like children, wealth, and home. The negative aspect is shown in 2 verses. It's a little arduous going, isn't it? Because the point seems pretty simple. I'll read one more verse because it's along the same lines. But just do a refresh. The question, going back to text 50, why is it that when the residents of Vrindavan saw Krishna come back, their affection for Krishna, that now this third time around, was even more than for their own sons? It was more than for when Krishna was their son. They had more affection for Krishna when he wasn't their son than when Krishna was their son. That is unusual. Because when Krishna, let's go back, when Krishna was Mother Jasoda's son, they had affection for their sons, their children, but they found they had more affection for Krishna than even for their own son. Not because he's the personality of Godhead, but just they found they had that kind of affection. And then Krishna became their son. So that increased their affection for their son because Krishna, and then their son. But when he came back, so the answer was given already, by the way. The answer was, Krishna was so jubilant. He'd been away from those cowherd boys for a year. He was just being with himself. And he was missing their association for a whole year. They were under Yogamaya. They were just like, they didn't even know that time had passed. But Krishna did. And the calves, because he loves the calves too. It describes in the 8th chapter, this is chapter 14, in the 8th chapter, there's it's childhood pastimes of Krishna. The beginning part is the elders decide, let's move from Gokula, there's too many disturbances, let's go to the other side of the river Jamuna, to the Vrindavan forest, etc., and they shift. And at that time, Krishna is 3 years, 4 months. And so when the cow herding in Vrindavan starts, Krishna insists on going with Nanda, with the cows. And the cow herds are noticing wherever Krishna goes, that's where the cows go. And Krishna, the cows love Krishna, and Krishna loves the cows. He won't stay back. And, they don't have anything to do because wherever Krishna goes, that's where the cows go. And Krishna wants to herd the cows. And there's this big thing going on. Mother Jasoda says, no, they're too big. You're so small. But Nanda sees he is so, he can't be taken away from that attraction for being with the cows. So he makes a compromise. You can take care of the calves. So now, when this pastime takes place, he's already 5 years old. So 1.5 years roughly passed taking care of the calves. But he loves the calves. And the calves love him. And so the parents, the adults, are seeing the joy that's radiating from Krishna. And they're experiencing more joy than when Krishna was their own son. That's the reason. But the logic for several verses now is, what's the seat of attachment? Ultimately it's resting upon Krishna. But that which is resting upon Krishna, that's the soul is resting upon Krishna. That soul is the resting place of the body and the paraphernalia of the body and things. And the seat of attachment and that which one holds dear is the Atma. That's the argument. Then the next verse is less attached to the paraphernalia. House, possessions, even family members. The king and his kingdom. The king is more attached to himself than the kingdom. If the kingdom is lost, he doesn't lose his life. Okay. We'll go on. Text 52. It's very similar. Indeed, for persons who think the body is the self, O best of kings, those things whose importance lies only with their relationship to the body are never as dear as the body itself. That's along the same line. It's just getting closer to the soul. They're all kind of lined up on the same point. Vishwanath, there's no BBT commentary. Vishwanath writes, fools consider the self to be the body. From their point of view, this verse is spoken. The attachment of such persons for their own body, as if that the body is the self, is more for the son than for the sons, wealth, and house. I mean, If you lose your house or lose your wealth, it's not the same as losing your body. It may be, difficult, but it's not the same. Jiva Goswami writes, Dehatmavadinam refers to those people who are extremely undiscriminating, thinking the body to be the self. Even they, however, take the self as more dear. By identifying the self with the body becomes dearest. Certainly. O best of kings, those kings who think the body is the self are not good kings. Those who understand the Atma are good kings. Those who understand the Lord are better. Those who have affection for Krishna alone are the best. You are the best of kings. Rajanya sa uttama. And so Jiva Goswami, this is final. Even for persons who think the body is the self, O best of kings, those things whose importance lies only in their relationship to the body are never as dear as the body itself. Same point. Okay, so we've gone over it a few times, and it hasn't been easy going, I must say. But let's see if there's some discussion. There's probably a reason why so many verses to explain something that's so simple. Because it seems quite simple. And making something simple complicated. That's what it appears. There must be a reason. Anyone in the room? Comment, question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So, what you said,
What?
We just discussed, as I have heard before also, when we identify ourselves with the body, then we develop the attachments, right? So, is there the same thing when we think ourselves as self? I mean, I'm lost. What was? So when we identify ourselves with the body, then we develop all these attachments with the family and other things, whatever possessions we have.
Well, that's true, but that's not what's being said. If I've understood you correctly, when we have false ego, we're identifying with the body, and because we're identifying the body, we identify with family members, the products of the body. That's a true statement. But what's being said is comparative. More dear than the house is the body. More dear than the body is the self, the Atma. So there's stages of self-conception, in other words. So that's what's being said. My understanding of what's going on here is they're pointing, Shukadeva Goswami is, the question is being asked to point towards Krishna, the original source. The Paramatma is giving things, that's said at the very beginning several times, to giving kindness to all living entities. There's affection between the Paramatma and all living entities. And then there's the living entities having affection for things in relation to their living entities. Family so the body and the family and the house and paraphernalia. So the further away from Paramatma you get, the less affection. The closer you get to Krishna, the greater the affection. That seems to be what's being said here. So now, back to your question. Yes, if we have false ego, we will have affection for that which is in relation to the body. And we all have false ego. I mean, even before we have bodies, we have false ego. What to speak of? In terms of the sequence of creation, the living entity becomes covered with false ego even before there's a body. And then when we're trying to become, attached to Krishna, one of the last things, so there's the possessions, and one can be detached from possessions. And then it's go back and back and back. It's not, doesn't mean give up possessions or give up house or give up family. It's the speaking of attachment to or affection for. So it's something similar to what we've been discussing in the morning class. I'm not addressing your question, just talking on the topic in general. But the morning class is Uddhava Gita, and the first seven verses, is Krishna answering a question Uddhava asks. Uddhava asks the question, how can persons like me, who are very attached, become connected to you better? Very relevant question. And he speaks of detachment, and by that detachment to the temporary or asat, then you can develop attachment from me in various ways. And now we're just starting a little section where Uddhava says, well, for attached people, it's really hard to give up material desire. But that's the false ego, because desire is not the problem; it's the false desire, misdirected desire through false ego, desire in terms of the temporary. So that it's very powerful. False ego is very powerful. Has really strong grip on a lot of souls. All souls in this mature world are covered by false ego. Whatever the form of life is, that's it. That's me. That's false ego. But the message is that even that false ego, the body, and the misconception of the body as the self, is resting upon the Atma. So in other words, what's being said repeatedly was what's very dear is the Atma. But why is the Atma dear? Because it's connected to Paramatma. So now back to your question. You do your question again after hearing that. Is it what you're...
Yeah. So, yes, self, I'm trying to understand that. So when we understand the self more,
Yes.
Then we are less attached.
Yes. Brahmabhuta prasanatma nasochati nakangsati. Go the other direction. The more that one is attached to the temporary, the more we don't know who we are. The more we know who we are, the less we are attached to the temporary. But even with those that are attached to the temporary, it's resting upon who we are. The covering is resting upon what it's covering. That's the starting point of Shukadeva Goswami's answer. And he's building a bit of a case. It may help if we get to the conclusion of his argument. But yes to what you just said.
So then, Maharaj, how we ended up here? I mean, We have heard many times because of we develop enviousness with Krishna. That's why he is in the center, all that. But how did that envious even exist in the spiritual world?
The classic bugaboo question for you.
I mean, yeah, I have asked this question
I,
and I
I
didn't.
have multiple ways of answering that, and perhaps none of them are satisfying. One really short answer is there's no Shruti Praman that addresses that question. So we can't refer to a Shruti Praman to say, here's the answer to that question. Another not satisfying answer is when we're looking at effects, it's natural to search a cause because that's what we're familiar with. Cause, effect. So the effect is here as we hear, what's the cause? Then the answer is misuse of free will. Okay, then what's the cause of the misuse of free will? And then the answer is not satisfying. It's intrinsic within the soul to properly use or misuse free will because it's free will. And it's not, there's not something outside of the soul, it's of the soul to misuse or, so, well, wait a minute, do that again. Because there's proper use, misuse, and then when there's misuse, what's the prompt? What's the cause for misuse? And the not satisfying answer is there isn't a cause. It's misuse of free will, which is an option of the soul. And some souls make that option misuse of free will, choice. And once that choice is made, it's hard to get out. It's of the soul. Here's another not satisfying answer. Well, I find it pretty satisfying. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in that celebrated book that she sent to the West in English, Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. And you're familiar with that, right? No? The year that Prabhupada was born, Bhaktivinoda sent in English language a little booklet, Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts, to libraries at universities around the world. Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. So it's the life is the Leela, and the precepts is Dasamula, the 10 essential teachings. And one of them is about the jiva. And in there he writes, more or less verbatim, but not exactly verbatim. I can send you the document. Don't ask the misleading question. When was the living entity created? Or when the living entity was enthralled? Because neither are events within time. Because the question itself is, once upon a time, we're in this really nice place, and we misused our free will, and here we are. So how'd that happen? It's an event within time. The question itself is misleading because it places the event within time. Well, wait a minute now. What's an event that doesn't have time? He doesn't use this language, but there's chronological events and there's ontological events. Like living entities are fragmental parts of the Supreme, likened to a spark in a fire. So there's the material metaphor of a spark. First there's the fire, then there's sparks from the fire. So there's the Supreme Lord and there's living entities. And living entities have minute free will, because the Lord has, and some misuse. So what prompted them to misuse? That's the question. As if it's an event in time. They were in a nice place, and then they misused free will, and they fell to this bad place. That's an event in time. It's an event. But you place it within time, and the question itself is misleading, according to Bhaktivinoda. You don't need time to make an timeless event. Misuse of free will and restoring of free will. I was just reading something from Krishna's. This is from the process of creation, third canto, from the vantage point of the personality of God. The life of Brahma is, less than a moment. So sometimes it's said that when we turn to the spiritual world, it's as if no time has passed. You forget everything of this conditional life. The restoring of proper consciousness is as if this nightmarish material existence it's within the frame of time. It's within the frame of time, being here, but in the spiritual world, it's timeless. Time is conspicuous by its absence, and that's where we belong. So back to this. The shrutis there's no pramana. There's lots of shrutis about what to do once you're here. There's not lots of shruti about how we got here. Because the important thing is get back to that timeless place, and it's as if it never happened. Or say, placing ontological events as if they're chronological events is an exercise of futility. It's an exercise of misleading inquiry. Which, like I said, it's not satisfying. Because you still, yada, 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 but how did we get here?
Was that easy to make this choice, like this wrong choice?
It's not. The misuse of free will is not an event in time. It's misleading to think of it that way. And as long as you think of it in that way, you'll not get an answer. You'll go around and around.
But then there is a guarantee when we go back again there we will not.
The guarantee is from Krishna. Money back, guarantee. He'll give you a full refund.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. So continuing on the same one.
Same line, all right.
There are a few other points come in discussion. One is when we say, once we go back, then we don't come back again. Because first point is Krishna's guarantee. One who attains to my abode does not return back in this material world.
Yes.
But we were already there.
No, wait a minute. That puts it in time. Pardon me. But the premise is misleading. Well, wait a minute. We fell. Sounds like an event in time to me.
Right.
Sounds like an event to me. Event within time. We were there and something happened. Some time passed. We fell. But it doesn't have to be an event in time. So what's an event that's not within time? Well, it's outside our experience, isn't it? What's Nitya Leela anyways? Our tiny brain doesn't have the capacity to think of timeless events. There's ontological events. We're emanations from Krishna, but it's not that once upon a time. It's same, enthralled, created and enthralled. Once upon a time, Krishna looked at his watch and said, "You know what? I think there should be living entities." And boom, there's living entities. We came from Krishna, right? That's an event in time. But it's not an event in time. And that's a little easier to understand than falling. But, created and falling, it's according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they're both misleading. The premise is misleading.
And same question Prabhupada answers, that what is the guarantee we will not come back? Prabhupada said, because now you have learned the lesson. You will not forget that.
Yes,
But the point we say is, as soon as we go back there, as if we have woken up from the dream, we don't remember anything.
Yeah.
So how will we remember that lesson?
It's
we went there once.
It's at the soul level, not the mind level. That's how. We're relying upon our little binary processor. And the soul isn't relying on that. There's a spiritual mind. Look, the residents of Vrindavan, they forget when Krishna shows them the spiritual world. He takes them to by the side of the river Jamuna, where Akura Radha, or Brahma Radha it's called. And he shows them the spiritual world, and they forget everything. And they're already in the spiritual world. Our binary processor can't process these things. Keep trying if you want. You get a lot of smoke. Maybe some short circuits, but you won't get...
Already so much short circuit.
You won't get, I see the light. Now I can go around and tell everybody how it happened. It's not going to be like that.
So, there is one more question.
Thanks.
So we say attachment with this material conception of life. I am the body. Because of that, I have attachment with family and all other things. And when we get into spiritual practice, so we try to understand our real identity. We are practicing something, the process of bhajana kriya, shravanam and all that. In that also, sometimes we develop some sort of attachments with the devotees, with the temple, with the deities, all that. And that attachment get to that level that we try to minimize everybody else. Oh, my temple is best. My deities are best. Radha Kunj Bihari is best and all that. So in that process, even though we are becoming more attached to that circumstance, but we are, in one way, we try to minimize others also.
Yeah, that's not wholesome. But it's part of the intermediate stage of becoming wholesome. It's a hurdle that one has to overcome to go to the advanced stage, beyond the intermediate stage.
So that intermediate stage itself will not help us become liberated or go back to Krishna.
No, it will help you become attached to Krishna. And as you genuinely, the price one has to pay is eagerness to reach Krishna. And there's a whole series of concentric circle obstacles. One of them is, us and them.
Right.
So, keep going. Many people, it's rare that people keep going. It's common that people will get stuck. Us and them. Friend and enemy. It's common. And one could even say it's natural. from material experience, which is part of the argument here. Look, a king, but there's a king like Maharaj Parikshit who's totally attached to Krishna. He doesn't see us and them. It's bhakti is rarely achieved. Pure bhakti is rarely achieved. The beginning stages of bhakti, anyone can chant and think, our group and your group.
Right. That is the most common we see.
Yeah, it's neophyte. And then some people can see, no groups. And some people can see beyond that. It's a very important topic. It's in this very first section of Uddhava Gita, this very topic.
So, which chapter of 11th canto?
11th canto, chapter 7. It's what we're discussing of late. And there's this whole topic, wait a minute. There's injunctions and prohibitions. There's pravriti and nivritti. There's do's and there's don'ts. And, it's Vedic. So how can you say go beyond Vedic? Because there are things that are to be done and not to be done. Things that are good and things that are bad. And Krishna is advocating go beyond it. So what's beyond it doesn't mean you trash good and bad. You don't turn your intelligence off and see what's what. That's not the thing. But you see beyond it is to see what's the purpose behind it. It's to elevate one to the standard of goodness and then to enter into transcendence. It's good because it helps one come to transcendence. And therefore we accept that which is to be done. And we stay away from that which is not to be done. But supposing there's somebody over there, using this example, there's groupism. Now what do? You go beyond groupism. And you may, depending upon your capacity and your propensities and so forth and so on, you don't act on that platform, and you speak the scripture, and you live the scripture, which is beyond that platform. Na sochati, na kangsati. But to do that, it has to do the Brahmabhuta platform. So that's our target. And it's not the end. Mad bhaktim labhate. From that position, then bhakti begins. Wait a minute. I thought we're doing bhakti. And because I'm not at the no sochati, na kangsati stage. So maybe I'm not doing bhakti. No, but it means pure bhakti. And all the other is preliminary to help you. And that's why, don't be attached to good and bad and right and wrong and all those things. Us and them. Friend and enemy. The good guys and the bad guys. Our group, our religion.
Our society, our organization.
Etc. Now we should have affinity for our organization. Right. Because it's coming. We have great, but if we start to disrespect others that don't have the same, then that's our shortcoming.
One thing is having respect for our organization, right? We should have that.
And attachment for it.
Right. We should have attachment for our organization, but at the same time, not blaspheming others,
not disrespecting others, because they have their access to Krishna too, and it may be whatever it is. No, follow the acharya and acharyas of your teaching, and don't deviate, and be respectful of others that are doing the same. That's not usual, but that's the platform we're to come to. That's a more mature stage. And there's lots of less than mature. Abundant. And there's more abundant is people that don't do anything. Or in the name of, this ism, that ism, they have fights and kill each other.
Mm. It becomes very difficult to practically apply, because Krishna says if somebody has done some mistake, if he is established in proper consciousness, proper bhakti, he is still a pure devotee. But our mind goes only on looking at the shortcomings. We immediately start talking negative. Oh, that guy, he did this mistake. He fell down from his position. Rather than looking at whatever good they had done earlier, whatever they were doing, we immediately jump at the negative side.
Yes. That's neophyte. Anything else?
A question from the Zoom call.
Yeah, we have something in the back here. And then we'll go online.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
You have a strong voice. Good. Even with a mask. Yes.
Maharaj, first of all, my apologies, I came late. So the verses that you were reading, could you give me the reference, like where these were from? 11th cantos.
Chapter 14, starting with 50, 51, 52.
Chapter 14.
11, 10, 14, 50 through 52.
10, 14, 50, 52. Okay. Yeah. And Maharaj, just to make sure the way you're explaining and the verses are, I'm understanding it correctly. So I'll let Prabhu.
He's just changing the battery.
Yeah. So Maharaj, there is Krishna, living entity, and the material conception for the living entity. When the living entity comes to the material world, it adopts the material conception with all the attachments and the body and the family and all that. But that living entity is living in the body, and as body being the medium, either the living entity will go towards the attachments and the material, all the material conception. But with the knowledge and realization, the one living entity can try to come to a platform that is not associated with the body or the material conception, and come towards the realization that it's a living entity as a jiva.
Living
From
entity
there on,
as a what?
So the living entity.
Living entity as a what?
As Atma.
Atma, okay.
So that is where that, in order to come to that realization, one has to come to that Vairag stage where leaving the, to come to that realization that these are the temporary attachment, temporary body, and the reality is the soul. From there on, when you mentioned that the other platform is where the living entity is going towards Paramatma or Krishna, that's the higher level. But since the body that Atma has gained is the medium, living in that body, in order to get towards Krishna, towards Paramatma, all that has to come to us that complete 100% vairag to realize to that platform. Living in that body itself, how does that Atma attains that state?
It's a really long question,
I was like
Can you
first
boil
person.
it down to one sentence?
So living entity, how does that get attracted towards Krishna after
Yukta
realizing?
Vairagya.
Sorry, Maharaj.
Yukta Vairagya.
Yukta Vairagya. Okay, that's what I was asking. Vairagya. Okay, what is Yukta Vairagya, Maharaj?
That which is from Hari Sambandha, that which has relation with Hari, it's used in service to Hari. The problem is not the body. The problem is identification with the body. But if we see the body as Krishna's property, because he can take it, and he's given it, it's through material nature, but he takes it and gives it. He gives it and takes it. So it's his. We're inside, and he is too. And we're meant to use the body by our free will in his service. And that's how one gets free from the body. Offer it to Krishna. And the objects and the attachments, offer it to Krishna. It's family life. Offer it to Krishna. Engage. So it's gradual, but eventually, completely. So the offer to Krishna part, that sacrifice, in one sense, in a lower sense, that's karma yoga. But in the higher sense, it's only one thing. Pleasing Krishna. You use things, the body, the objects of the extensions of the body, the objects of the senses out there that aren't even mine, just stuff, in service to Krishna. And then you keep going. You know his point. Other living entities, other people that have other values and other views and other activities. And we engage ourselves in serving Krishna in relation to those entities, souls and situations, according to our capacity.
So Maharaj, living in the material world with all the activities, that day-to-day activities that we perform, and in the even dovetailing those activities towards Krishna, can a individual attain Yukta Vairagya?
No, I said it, I'll say it again, that's karma yoga. Dovetail is karma yoga. And it depends on the degree of bhakti. But the very term dovetail means, let's say, somebody likes music. Hey, the Hare Krishna people do music, so let me do music for Krishna. That's dovetail. Somebody likes to eat. Hey, Hare Krishna, they have nice food. Let me go there and we'll have some nice food. The intention behind the activity is different in Shuddha Bhakti. But it can help one, yes, it can help one become detached, but the purpose of the detachment is attachment. The complete detachment is complete attachment. Or complete attachment means, detachment doesn't mean, okay, now I'm going to burn my house down. I'm going to tell my family members, get out. Or I'm just going to leave, or something. It's not negation. It's everything is for Krishna, and that's Vaikuntha. Without material attachment, but it's on the strength of bhakti. So how do you get to that? By bhakti. Okay, we're going to go online and
Thank you, Maharaj.
see whatever we can come up with. Let's do your Zoom, your people here.
There's a question from Suresh Vaidya Prabhu. According to modern psychology, basic human needs make us body conscious.
Make us body conscious.
And we develop false ego until we try to become free by sadhana.
Well, we don't develop false ego. We start with. But go ahead. It could become stronger.
Right. So basically, that is his question. That according to modern psychology, our basic human need make us more body conscious. So how to try to come free from that sort of consciousness?
Well, you live simply and develop your bhakti. And as you live simply and develop your bhakti, that which one considers to be necessities may diminish, commonly will diminish. On the strength of bhakti developing, feeling necessity for this and that and the other thing. A little simple example. How many pair of shoes do you need? And commonly, how many pairs of shoes do people have? But how many they need? And so simplicity is not necessarily austerity. It's just mode of goodness. It's just keeping things simple. You don't have to, so keep things simple. Now, this isn't good for the gross national product. There was a college student at Washington University, and he was from China. He was studying economics. He said, your whole program really goes against economic growth. Live simply and... So how does it work? And there's another contentment besides stuff. Anyway, so does that respond to the question? Okay.
The second question is, how would you explain to a new devotee the difference between body consciousness and Krishna consciousness?
Wow. I would say it depends on the new devotee. How do you explain it? Chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita. So they start with what's known and see where the holes are in that which they know, and then see what's the alternative. So commonly people have a conception that the body is the self. But really? So using one of Prabhupada's examples, we say, my hand, my foot, my head, and then who's the possessor of the hand and the head and the arm and the leg? There's the me. Even our language makes a distinction between the body and the possessor of the body. Or, from common experience, we once upon a time had a baby body and then a little child's body and then a young boy or girl's body and then so forth. And so the bodies are changing, but there's still the sense of me. So that me and the body are different. That's notional, but that's to get a concept of what the soul is distinct from the body. Those are some explanations. I like to answer questions depending upon the person and the sense of their ability to understand. Maybe just ask them, do you have an idea of what, do you accept that there is soul? What's your idea of what soul is? Rather than tell them what's their idea. Most people will say yes and ask them what their conception is. And then that's interesting. Here's what some teachings say, and here's what Bhagavad Gita says. That may help people if you show interest in what their ideas are. So it depends on.
So first, basically, we have to gauge that person.
Yes, appropriate to their situation.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This is 3 questions from Snehavali Mataji, Devidasi. So, first in verse 49, Jiva Goswami first gave 3 reasons for affection: beauty, possessiveness, and bodily relationship. He first rejected all 3 for why coward woman's affection for Krishna increased, but later in the same purport he gave these same reasons to explain why the affection of coward women increased towards Krishna. Is this correct understanding?
I'd have to go back and look at it to answer that. The first part of what you said is right. I mean, because I specifically remember the reference you're making. But that he circles around and says those 3 are actually the reasons, I don't recall that that's what Jiva Goswami writes.
So should I move on to the next question?
Yeah.
It looks like coward women have more affection for Krishna than for their own sons before Brahma Vimohan Leela.
Yes, they do.
And after Brahma Vimohan Leela, also the affection towards Krishna increased more.
Yes.
So Brahma Vimohan Leela only increased mother's affection towards Krishna. Is that not correct?
Well, here's my understanding, and I'll say it again. Before, not because Krishna is God, but he is the all-attractive Supreme. And so they had affection for him more than for their own sons. And in fact, they desired to have Krishna as their son. Except Krishna became their son. And their affection for their son, who is now Krishna, became more than their affection for their son, or even their affection for Krishna, because now Krishna is their son. And then the third is, after the Brahma Vimohan Leela, their affection increased even more than the first 2 times for Krishna. Why? And the short answer is, Krishna was in such an ecstatic mood, having been separated from the coward boys and calves for a whole year. He was so radiantly happy, they became happy and attached to him and attracted to him even more. That's my understanding. Next.
So this is from Carlos P. What should I do to improve sincerity to be regulated in my sadhana, like waking up early in the morning and chanting? I chant 16 rounds, but not in morning.
Find somebody who you can team up with and, wake you up in the morning, join the japa call, or, find some, through sadhu sangha, find some way that can add strength to your strength. There are groups that do this. There are people that I know that at such and such a clock, one person it's easier for them to get up, and they call the other person. They have to leave their phone on. And then they call them back in 3 minutes. Did you get up? So you find some way through sadhu sangha to overcome they give you added strength to be able to do what you want to do. And that's there's other ways, but strengthen your hearing and chanting in a general sense. Find some service that you really like, and then you can look forward to doing that service that you really like, and that will help you also. Sadhu sangha.
So this is again from Snehavali Devidasi. Krishna as Paramatma, the statement Krishna as Paramatma gives affection to all beings. Krishna as Paramatma gives affection to all beings.
Yes.
He is dearer to everyone than their own Atma.
Yes.
This is true only in case of devotees.
No. It's covered for non-devotees, but it's true for non-devotees.
Because as self-centered, person will not realize this. So
That's
how
correct.
is this?
Yeah, they won't realize it. It's covered.
How is Sukadeva Goswami giving this reason for people are attached to self and body than to their relatives? I'm not clear how Paramatma logic is applicable to these last verses.
Hang on, because it's where the train is going. In 3 verses later, Krishna is going to come out of the box.
And this is question from Sanchari Devidasi. What does it mean when we state that a devotee's body becomes purified?
What does it mean?
Yeah. What does it mean when we say, or when we state that a devotee's body becomes purified?
Means spiritualized. Or the tendencies for Rajagun, Tamagun are diminished in the body. And the tendency to just naturally be engaged in service to Krishna instead of the lower modes of nature tendencies has matured. That's purified. Okay.
And there's one more question from Sri Radhika Devidasi. What is the difference between bhakti in Sattva Guna and bhakti in Shuddha Sattva? Is our practice as sadhakas attempting to raise us to the platform of bhakti in Sattva Guna? If so, I have also heard that mode of goodness by nature is habituating. How to not get habituated to bhakti in the mode of goodness?
Good association. And good association includes, associating with Prabhupada through his books and recordings and, sound. That's good association. So that the complacency tendency is roused, doesn't set in, but you go beyond it. It's easy to just feel comfortable and thus complacent and thus, some affinity for mode of goodness. So keep association with persons that will encourage you to keep going by their example, as well as their words. Okay. One more. Zoom.
This is also like the first question which keep coming very often.
Huh?
This is also like the first question which keep coming very often. We were with Krishna earlier, that question, right?
I don't.
So
Okay.
this question is, we have earlier heard so much that Narayan is supreme and from him all the incarnations come. So Krishna is the 8th incarnation. Now we start to hear Krishna is the first from whom everything comes. Even Narayan comes from Krishna. So how to shake out that earlier idea that Narayan is the topmost from whom all the incarnation come and put this new idea in our mind?
Well, it has everything to do with the pramana, or the means of knowing things, or evidence that you support. Because it's not just, hearing about Narayan, it's also hearing about devas and hearing about yagyas and hearing about other things that people get attached to. And it's not just within, the Vedic tradition. There's people from so many other traditions that have heard other things and the tendency to have affinity. So the answer is, it has to do with pramana. And I suggest this devotee goes through the pramana kanda section of Tattva Sandarbha if they really want to understand it very clearly. Why we accept Srimad Bhagavatam as the topmost pramana. You don't have to go through the whole the whole pramana kanda section. The latter portion it goes into means of knowing something. Anyway, I don't do a whole Tattva Sandarbha class. But amongst the Vedas, the best is not the Shrutis, but the Smritis, and there it gives reasons. And amongst the Smritis, there's the modes of goodness Smritis, and they're better than the other Smritis. And amongst the mode of goodness Smritis, there's the Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by all the Puranas. It's the best. It's the superlative. It's Shuddha Sattva, Amala Purana. So how do we know that? From the authority of the Vedas. So supposing somebody was unfamiliar with the Srimad Bhagavatam and has heard other authority scriptures, well, with your careful contemplation of what the Puranas say about Srimad Bhagavatam, you take that authority of the Vedas themselves. I mean, for this person answering this question, think of how I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know nothing about nothing. And look what I'm doing. How did that happen? So, how do I deal with the stuff that I used to do? How does anyone deal with the stuff they used to do? There's evidence, and then there's examples. And the examples of our great Vaishnava acharyas who accept this evidence and explain it so lucidly. So that's compelling. But, it's not to say that's not going to do the us and them. Supposing there's a lot of somebodies that hold that Narayan is supreme. Fantastic. We don't look down our nose and say, na 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 na. They're wonderful. Wonderful.
So if somebody is not able to give up that idea, Narayan is supreme, let it be.
And we don't have. Our business is not to persuade people to give up their ideas. Our business is to become lovers of Krishna, and we have love for Krishna, so we express our love for Krishna, and the foundation for that is the topmost authority.
So if somebody has so much affection for Narayan, considering Narayan to be supreme,
Fantastic.
at the worst case they will go to Narayan.
Fantastic. Let them go to Narayan.
Right.
We'll have a big festival. It's not our group, their group.
Ultimately, Narayan.
The goal is bhakti. The means is bhakti, the goal is prema bhakti. So do that. Just follow very, very carefully. Become a pure devotee.
Sometimes we get so much caught up with that. No. Krishna is supreme. How do you say Vishnu is supreme?
Okay. We went over this already. Groupism.
Right.
Maybe next lifetime, Prabhu, you'll be fortunate. You could be part of our group.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.